if I can bring everybody up here. Let's see. All right, how's everybody doing today?
Doing good, thank you.
Good. All right. Okay, so you can all see the slideshow without my crazy notes now, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
and don't forget to introduce yourself and everything too. Okay.
Oh, I will, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And let me change my view too, because right now you're staring at the side of my face. So let me change that. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right. So I'm Brian Porter. I've been with the office with Gateway specifically since 2015, like around mid 2015. It was the first office I've joined. So that coincides with the beginning of my real estate career. So I've been going on 6 years at this point. So fairly new, to the industry, as compared to many out there. For those of you that don't know me, I have a history of paramedic. That's where I had the beginning of my career, and so I worked at that job for a very, very long time. And I actually still jump on an ambulance about once or twice a month, just to keep my foot in the door. And I actually really just enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun for me. So I'll be doing that at some point this weekend. So I do that a little bit now as well, but coming from that line of work into real estate was a huge, huge change for me. At real estate, I was kind of prepared in the sense that I was used to talking to every different type of person, and usually in fairly stressful situations. And so the just art of connecting and keeping calm I came in with, but outside of that, building a business, even how to operate a copier machine, I had no idea what I was doing. And so getting into it, I realized very early, the only way that I'm going to be successful in this business is if I am really just taking classes like this. And that's why I joined KW, because they had such great educational tools. And so I knew that if I were to not try and reinvent the wheel, and I were to do tried and true things and take those steps that other people have already taken, I'm going to be successful as well. And so that's exactly what I did. I took Ignite back in 2015. And then by 2016, I had completely replaced my paramedic income. And then it just grew from there. So that's a little bit about my background. And so as far as getting into the business, I was a big door knocker. So those of you that have only been in the business since around the start of COVID or later may not know that about me, but that's kind of what I'm known for around the office, is the door knocking guy. I was knocking on, 15 to 20,000 doors a year to add people to my database. And so, this class is great because it's forcing you to talk to 10 people every day and send out those letters and make those connections, add 10 new people to your database and put them on plans. If you do those things, there's absolutely no way that you're not going to be successful over time. And I know that the last year has been a little bit crazy, and so it's been a little all over the place. But those actions, if you're taking them, they're going to start to work out here very, very quickly. So that's enough about me. I'm going to jump in. We're going to talk about negotiations today. And I want to make sure that if there's anything that anyone came in, let me grab a pen, with anything specific that they wanted to talk about as far as negotiations today. Does anybody have anything that they really want to cover?
Well, just me personally, I understand that understanding the contracts is very powerful, and knowing exactly when I can, counter, or I guess my question or my comment is often I don't know exactly, how to negotiate, I guess.
Right. Yeah. As far as we're going to talk about a few different tactics and things like that. At the end of the day, I like to think about negotiations as what can I do to make sure that all parties remain as happy as possible, while still protecting my client and making sure that everyone is heard. And so it's essentially just a win-win. And so if you're always looking for solutions, you're not just listening to the listing agent tell you something. If you're representing the buyer and say, okay, well, I know that's what they want, but this is what my client wants. It needs to be something more like, okay, I hear you. Let me see if there's any way that we can work around that. Or, I wish that we could work around that one. Unfortunately, that's just not going to be possible for my client, but we can do this. And so it's trying to find those win-wins, that give and take, to make sure that everybody's happy. And that's just so important throughout every step of this process. And we'll talk a little bit about that for sure. Anything else? Any specific things you want to talk about today?
I'm just curious about
how important, I guess, offering, various services or perks to a deal are, or is it really just a price point issue for the most part?
Perks. So when you say perks, are you talking about like terms versus pricing, or?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So terms are huge. And in this market, terms are tough. I'm not sure, how many of you are out there really actively writing a lot of offers for buyers right now, but it is, yeah, it's, as it's very, very tough because, you have to explain. Essentially, it's like you're talking out of two sides of your mouth with your clients, to be honest, because you have to give them, what you think is the best decision as far as what's the safest decision. As a broker, that's our job, or as agents, that's our job. But you also have to share with them the reality of the situation. So it's a lot of conversations I'm having right now, just because if I know there's 100% the house is going to get 10 offers minimum, and, the top offers are all going to be non-contingent. Even if I am the highest offer by a little bit, there's a good chance we're not going to get that property because of our contingencies. And so it's one of those conversations that I have with my buyer where it's, I have to tell you that I always let my buyers know it's a good idea to get your own inspections and it's in this and that. But however, I also need to share with you the reality of the situation. And this is what you're probably going to be up against. And if you've had a recent listing, that helps even more. Or if you can talk to somebody, in the office and get their, how did their listing go in the same area or whatever, then you can show them as well. Because I create an Excel spreadsheet for all of my sellers when I'm going over multiple offer situations, and I'll save those to give it to my buyer. So I say, hey, this is an offer situation that I just had in that same area last week. Just wanted you to know, here's the reality of the situation. They can look through and be like, okay, non-contingent, 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 way over asking. And then they'd start to think, okay, I need to, so I don't want to ever tell somebody to do something that they're not comfortable with. And I do want to protect them. And if there aren't good inspections and things like that, I would absolutely encourage them not to, but they also have to come, to their own conclusion as far as their risk tolerance based on their current circumstances and what they're willing to do to compete. But yeah, terms are huge right now. Dennis, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to ask about terms. How do you handle, when sellers, I've dealt with this a few times already where they're wanting like rent backs, and, I let my clients know that it could be very risky because now you're a landlord, and, due to the circumstances of COVID, it can be a sticky situation perhaps.
Right. It can be. I would definitely say if you have concerns about lease after sale, things like that, maybe talk to Laura, because I know that we have some attorney. Every week they have like a topic with our, retained attorney. And she definitely sent us things on, the pros and the cons of some of those contracts. So there might be something that she can send you on that. And then I think maybe if the next time Mike has one of those purchase agreement classes where he goes over every line of that contract, that would be a great thing to go over with him, because he can give you some stories, because he's seen a lot from even being the president of the association for a while. So he's seen a lot of stuff. Okay. So, as far as that's concerned, I like to keep it to, if I can, I'll go over this a little bit later. There are two different types of seller in possession after sales. One is more of an actual landlord versus tenant agreement, and that would be if it was 30 days or longer. And so that would be a different 5-page form. It's called the residential lease after sale agreement. And that one sets up more of an actual landlord tenant situation. It also has a chance to maybe not as easily get approved by the lender. So always need to check with them. Typically they will though. And then the other one is the seller in possession form, the SIP form, both car forms. That one's up to 29 days. And that one, I believe, from my understanding, is less risky, but definitely confirm with Mike, because that's more of a, you're allowing them to stay in the house for a little bit longer versus they're becoming a, tenant. Most of the time, the 29-day SIP form is totally okay. And a lot of times somebody will ask me for a 30-day, rent back lease after sale, however they say it. I will even, check with them and say, hey, you know what, why don't we add, if you need the full 30 days, let's think about adding, one extra day to the close of escrow and then shortening that to 29 days, just so that we can stay out of this crazy, lease after sale type thing. And most agents, if they may not even know about those two differences, but when you say if we do this one day here, 29 days here, and we can stick with a 1-page, very simple document versus a 5-page lease agreement, most agents out there are going to be like, oh yeah, let's, because they don't want to, they've probably never even seen the other document.
I have an SIP sign now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I see your hand up, William.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just really had a question about what you were saying with regards to kind of analyzing, I guess, the deals that were actually made. So your process is not just to take a look at comps in terms of market price, but also what is actually happening with regards to negotiation on all those deals.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm looking at comparable properties, that's a huge piece of the puzzle, obviously. And then when I'm doing that, for the pending properties, I'm not sure if this is what you're going for, but for the pending properties, active contingents, things like that, I'll call those agents and just see what they're willing to share. Some of them will just flat out tell you, some of them, because you're technically not supposed to be sharing, pending prices and things like that. Some of them will just give it to you. Some of them will give you a range. Typically, I'll give some kind of a range to let people know what's going on. And as far as everything else, it's almost, my conversation, if you were to call me, is I'd say, hey, we went in this range. It was fully non-contingent. We had 12 offers, blah, blah, blah. And so that really, really helps me to understand what things are at, currently, versus just the solds, where we're in a market right now where I don't know if it's cooling or not. It seems like in some areas, I feel like it cooled a little bit. And so just having the current activity really, really helps. And so I want to talk to everybody, even if it just closed. I'd like to know what it was like for them, if it was very close to my house as far as specs are concerned. But just for instance, yesterday, I called an agent because I'm going to be writing an offer on another property. They just went pending. And I was thinking, okay, based on the comps, they're probably way over and, non-contingent and all of that. And in reality, they only had a couple of offers and they actually sold just at asking. And so to me, I was like, okay, wow, that's a very different market than I just sold in 2 weeks ago for my seller. I don't know if there was a shift or what's going on, but I need to be a little bit more conservative. And so that all of those little pieces work together when I'm trying to formulate what their offer, what I'm going to, ask them as far or encourage them to write. But Julia.
Hi, good morning. I just have a quick question. What role does the agent play when the appraiser comes out to appraise the property, when you're representing the buyer? Do you have any real conversations with the appraiser about the purchase price that you guys submitted? Does that play a role in anything? And is the appraiser even really open to talking to you?
Yeah, it's very dependent on that appraiser. And so when I'm doing that, I'll typically connect with the seller and figure out, okay, were they wanting to meet the appraiser? Do they mind if I meet the appraiser? Sometimes I like to meet the appraiser because, if I know, especially if I know a lot about that area and the other agent may not, or I have some inside information as far as some of the other pending properties and things like that they're going to have to go out and look for, and I can just give it to them. I like to meet the appraisers, but sometimes the listing agent, they just really want to do that. And I'm not opposed to it really, but it just kind of depends on the appraiser. So if I get in, I'll come prepared. I'll come with a few of the comps that I thought were, the ones that we were looking at, and I'll just basically tread lightly when they come in. I'll just say, hey, I brought the comps, for just what we were looking at when we were making this offer, and I have some information as far as what some of the other offers looked like and some of the nearby properties. I'd love to go over any of that for you if you have any questions. Otherwise, just let me know because I don't want to overstep or anything like that. And so because you're going to have those old school appraisers that just don't even want you there. Or, they might just say, hey, I'm totally fine. I've seen the comps, and if they shut you down, don't fight with the appraiser. That's not going to help you at all. I'll let them do their thing. But a lot of times they'll say, hey, actually, no problem at all. They might be newer or, they're just super, super friendly and they're interested, or, it might be a borderline property that they weren't really sure about anyways. And so my information might help them. And so a lot of times they are willing to talk. It's kind of a 50-50. I would say more like 75% of them, as far as the ones I've talked to, are okay with talking. But all right. And I apologize. I'm going to be drinking a lot of water today. I just got back from Mexico and I'm dealing with a little bit of a sinus infection from ocean water. So I'll be losing my voice a little bit, but I'm going to jump right in here. Let me know if you have any questions. I've got you guys up at the top, so I should be able to see your hands go up if you have any questions about anything. So we're going to be talking about negotiations today, clearly. And so here we go. All right. Basically, we're going to talk about negotiating the contracts and kind of every step of the process. It's not just negotiating the contract. It's negotiating with your client to get them to write the contract. It's negotiating that contract with the other agent. It's negotiating throughout the process, requests for repairs and things like that. So we'll cover some of that stuff today as well. So the two main areas of negotiation, there's going to be the offer phase. The goal of negotiation is to get into contract. And then there's the option period, which is basically the contingency period, the time that you have to negotiate based on what you found in investigations, what you found, as far as the appraisal, if it came back, low or anything like that. And loan stuff, not really too much to negotiate there. The loan's going to work or it's not. Or you could get into a position where maybe the debt to income was thrown off just slightly into where it is almost a negotiation. But mainly appraisal and the investigations. So it's asking to consider how can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal. It's hugely important. Most agents really just, not most agents, but a lot of the agents that I work with don't really know how to negotiate. It's kind of not something that they do very often. It's not something that they practice. And so they'll give out way too much information. Or they'll just, they'll talk way too much. They'll get heated. You can kind of figure out where the sticking points are. Or they'll just flat out tell you things that they shouldn't tell you. So I had somebody I was mentoring at one point, and they were in a negotiation, and I actually grabbed the phone out of her hands at the time and just muted it for a second because she was about to lose $100,000 for a client. And so we were able to kind of fix that very, very quickly. However, it is very, very possible to win or lose a lot of this stuff. So negotiating is important, but I think the main thing is don't be scared of it. Just be confident and ask questions. Keep the other side talking. The more they're talking, the less you're talking, the better, because they're going to probably say things that they shouldn't say. So, what are some ways that you negotiate in everyday life? I mean, everything I see is a negotiation, honestly. I mean, if you pull up to a stop sign at the same time as somebody else and you both have the right of way, you're in a negotiation. You're trying to get a kid to do something that they absolutely don't want to do and you want them to do, and you have to convince them that they want to do it in order for them to make that decision. I feel like that's like every client I've ever worked with. It's just me trying to give them the options while, convincing them that the right option is what they want to do. And it came from them and it was almost their idea. And that's, a lot of negotiating. As far as skills that negotiators possess, again, it's patience. I think it's the ability to ask good questions and the ability to stay quiet, even if it's a little bit awkward. Sometimes there's just a lot of silence, and whoever speaks first loses. And so you got to be comfortable with that at some level. And then it's asking, why is asking important, asking questions important? There's a lot of black and white if there's no communication. So finding out where the actual sticking points are, finding out what's behind objections and things like that is hugely, hugely important in negotiating a deal. So the two common points, price and terms. We kind of talked about that a bit earlier. So terms, you've got closing costs. So closing costs is one of the points of negotiation in the contract. In this market, we're not seeing a lot of variance in closing costs. So if you were in more of a buyer's market, you might see, buyers asking the seller to do more than they normally would in this market. Right now, you're seeing mainly on almost every contract, not every contract, but most of them, a very standard breakdown of costs. And within that standard breakdown of costs, you're going to have the buyer paying for a lot of lending side stuff, and you're going to have the seller paying for more title, escrow, things like that. For me, when I have a lot of clients ask me what their closing costs are going to be, I can't tell them that. But typically what I do see is somewhere around 0.7 to like 1.2% on either side. And so that kind of helps my buyer. I'll let them know, factor, about 1% or 1.2% on top of your down payment. That typically helps them to at least be somewhat prepared. And then they can go to escrow and title to talk a little bit more about that and get a better idea as well. Go ahead, William.
Yeah, on that point, do you don't offer them a peek at the net sheet from the title company, and if you do, how often do you update that and I guess keep them informed with?
Right. Yeah, I will have I can get a net sheet for them if they want to have like a really, really solid idea once they're writing an offer. I typically don't have a lot of my buyers request a net sheet along with writing the offer. They just kind of figure that it's going to be somewhere around 1%, 1.2%. So if they're putting down 20%, they're factoring, okay, it's going to be around 21% of whatever I offer. But I will, sometimes they will ask for it, and the title company can send that right over, or give them at least some kind of an idea of what it would look like. Based on just, they can estimate it at some level. Typically it's still going to come out to that like 1.2%. And then clearly, obviously, when I get into contract on something, I can get them a net sheet very, very quickly that way as well.
From escrow.
Yeah. So I will do that sometimes for sure. And then as far as the closing costs are concerned, if you ever have any questions about that, most title companies do have PDFs online that you can download, like all of them, like Chicago, Old Republic, First American, and you can download those, and it will tell you, is there a city transfer tax? Is there a county transfer tax? What is it? How is it split? Who pays for what? And all of that, who pays for escrow, title, things like that. And so you can typically get those answered very quickly. And if you ever have a question beyond that, or you can't see something, you can always call a local KW office and see if maybe the MCA can, track somebody down in the office to ask a question as well. But typically those can be answered based on that. But again, most of what I'm seeing, it's a pretty standard breakdown of costs across the board, even to the point to where most buyers are still asking the sellers to pay for the warranty, which, even in a market this hot, it's one of those things where sellers don't really care. So it's pretty standard at this point. Closing date, as far as closing date's concerned, you might have a seller that it's a vacant property, and they just want to get it sold as quickly as possible. And so if you can, if you talk to the lender and you can, see if you can reduce that time a bit, that's going to be really, really helpful. So, asking the lender, what's the minimum amount of days that we would need to close? And then working around that can help. But you also want to be in communication with the agent as well, because you can get into a position where you write an offer thinking, hey, they don't even live there. And so we just want to close really, really fast. And you don't ask that question. And you write the offer with like a 15-day close of escrow. And then you find out that actually, they're just out of town. They're going to be moving back, and they're going to be living there for a little bit. And they're in the process of buying another home, and they need more time. And so that 15-day close of escrow that sounded really, really good when you're writing the offer is actually not what the seller needs. And so communication is key. And then that's when you can get into things like seller in possession, residential lease after sale, things like that. If they need more time, one trick that a lot of people will use with a seller in possession form is, the buyer's first payment on their mortgage is not going to typically be due until after the end of the first month. Obviously, that's payment's going to come back to them at the end 30 years later. However, they're not going to be doubling up right off the bat. And so a lot of times buyers in this market, they will do like a free 29-day SIP, knowing that it's going to feel like they're not spending extra money. And then for the seller, it's kind of like increasing the price of the home a little bit. Go ahead, Dennis.
I was going to ask, when you are reaching out to the selling agents, the listing agents, what type of questions do you ask them when you're, writing your offer? You say, hey, what is your seller looking for? What terms? Like, what questions are you asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's in here. So I'm gonna hold off on that one because we're gonna get there here in the next couple of slides. William?
Yeah, I had a similar question. I was going to ask if you had some sort of checklist of kind of, questions that you asked the seller or seller's agent before you had your buyer make an offer.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go over that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and I almost forgot. I know you're in Santa Clara County, correct?
Correct.
So I know that each county has a different kind of, I guess, I don't want to say regulation, but they have written in the terms as far as like how the closing costs are split. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's just can't be negotiated, or can you use that as some extra term for leverage?
You can. It's all negotiable. Everything is really. So you could put in like the buyer is willing to pay for some of the seller fees. I've seen that. I saw that on the last one I did actually a couple of weeks ago. And there was one buyer that was going to cover like the escrow and title fees or something like that. It was going to save my seller, I think, $5,000. And so, yeah, it makes the offer better. It's not done that much, and I don't think it makes that much of a difference. They didn't win. At the end of the day, the other offer was way higher and it was non-contingent, but it can help. It's just we're in one of those markets where homes are so expensive that those little kind of smaller fees are not as factored here, but it can help. Yeah, and it is definitely negotiable. All right. Okay. So conveyances, that's another point of negotiation with involving your terms. And that's basically just things you're asking them to leave with the home. And so if your buyer wants the refrigerator and the washer and dryer, that's the most common. And so they're going to get the stove and things like that for sure already. That's included with the home. Refrigerator and washer and dryer is typically something that's not. And so what I'll do when I'm asking questions for the seller is I'll just ask them if they know whether or not their client wants to keep those items. Typically they will, or they've already talked about it. If the seller wants to keep those items, a stove and a washer and dryer, you're looking at $3,000 to $4,000. And it's not necessarily or almost ever something that a buyer is willing to walk away because of or lose a house because of. And so I want to know that if I can already find out whether or not the seller plans to keep that, we won't write it into the contract. And I'll even remember to remind the agent when I'm presenting the offer that we didn't do that. So they know that we really are catering this offer to their client as much as we possibly can. But those conveyances are something else that you can look for. If there was, let's say there was $3,000 in section 1 work and the seller didn't want to do that section 1 work. And the buyer doesn't want to have to pay for it, but they also are planning to have to pay for refrigerator, washer and dryer, or something like that. They could write the refrigerator, washer and dryer into the contract and then offer to pay for the section 1 work. And a lot of sellers are going to see that as, okay, great, I don't have to do the work. And I'll just leave that stuff because I have to move anyway. And so little things like that is trying to figure out, how can we make this work? Conveyances, although very small, sometimes can make a difference, but not quite as much in this market. If you're spending $4,000 on appliances for, a house that's $200,000 somewhere in the Midwest, it's going to be a bigger deal and a bigger portion of what they're spending than, if they're buying a $1.4 million house in San Jose. EMD, there's the 3% deposit. That's a term that's technically negotiable as well. But if you in this market put down less than 3% as the deposit, the the seller's agent's going to have a red flag up wondering why. Is it just a cash poor situation that's going to make them nervous? Are they just unsure about the home? Does the agent just not understand what they're doing or know this market or whatever? They're going to have a slew of questions that you're going to have to explain if your buyer does that. And so just make sure that your buyer is very, very sure about the home. If they are, and they have the 3% deposit and they're comfortable with their contingencies, then, they should be okay. But typically it is 3% right now in this area. It's always a good idea, depending on the area that you're working, to call an agent out there and find out what the customary deposit is, because you will have areas even near here that might only be like a 1% deposit. And so why risk all 3% deposit when you could just risk the 1? And so if you're unsure, then you can ask them. Santa Clara County and most areas just right around here, it's going to be 3% typically. And then the other is repairs. And so if you're going to ask for, repairs with the contract or anything like that, that's going to weaken your offer. That's a term as well. And so just kind of keep that in mind, but that is another point of negotiation when you're submitting the offer. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of buyers ask for repairs just because no one is. And so they're just not getting the property. If they do ask for the repairs, they're probably not going to get it. And that's just kind of the way it is. It's sad, but that's where we're at right now.
Now, I have a question there.
Yeah.
Now, do you would you not even ask for a credit for the repairs?
Right.
Or is that the same for asking for repairs?
No, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea to ask for repairs. I'm not seeing it a lot. When you get 10, 15 offers, you might have 1 or 2 of them ask for repairs, but they're typically not the best offer in any way, shape, or form. And so, but yeah, you could. I mean, especially if there's nothing, I've had some deals recently that they hadn't been selling or they were overpriced originally. And we have asked for repairs along with the offer. So you can definitely do that. You could just do it right on the offer. In other terms, you could just put seller to complete items like, let's say 2A, 2B, 2C, whatever, or complete all section 1 items from to my report dated, whatever. You can put that into the offer as well. One thing to remember though, is right now, most people are doing pre-inspections. And so, and the reason they're doing that is because they're hoping to A, not have to renegotiate later, and B, probably get a non-contingent offer. And so that's what they're looking to do. And so if they're asking you to sign off on those disclosures, just make sure your buyer knows that they really need to read through and understand them. And they need to be comfortable with their offer with those things in mind. If there's something that they absolutely can't stomach, they're going to have to ask for it within the offer. And at the end of the day, they may not get it, but at least you know that they're comfortable. But basically what they're doing when they sign that is they're saying, we've read this and we're writing our offer as is, or asking you to fix this, but it's an as is offer. And so you're not going to be really able to go back and in good faith renegotiate that at that point based on anything that they've already signed off on. And so, you can't go into a house that's got, a room that was burned down, view it, write an offer, and then a week later say, oh, we didn't realize this room was burned down. We want a discount now. Clearly they knew that. And so they can agree, negotiate on other items and things like that, but just make sure they're comfortable with what they're signing off on. A lot of people I'm seeing are signing disclosure cover pages, and then they're coming back a few days later and realizing that the roof is bad. And now they're upset. It's like, okay, well, you signed off saying that you knew about the roof already. So we're not negotiating on the roof. And so, just make sure that they understand what they're doing when they read through that stuff. We'll talk a little bit about some negotiation tips. This would be in the book as well. Be professional. That's so important. People want to work with who they know, like, and trust. Your clients will work with who they know, like, and trust, and agents will work with who they know, like, and trust. Communication is huge. When I have a buyer go through a property and I know that they're at least interested, I'm calling that agent that day to let them know how it went, how much my buyer liked the property, establishing rapport, how's everything going so far, blah, 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 so I'm building a relationship with that agent. I'm not asking any serious questions yet, but I'm just kind of letting them know. Once I know that my buyer is probably going to write an offer, I'm back on the phone to say, hey, I think they're probably going to write. We're going over disclosures now, and I'll ask a few questions. And we'll go over some of those in a little bit too. But I'm basically staying in communication the entire time because, typically with my transactions, the agents that have been in communication from the beginning, I know them now. I feel more comfortable with them. They didn't just pop up out of nowhere and send an offer the day of, and I have no idea how serious they are. I don't know anything about anything. And they typically have been there long enough to see how things have progressed. They've asked smart questions. And I've probably been pretty good about giving them, decent answers, knowing that I'm helping them craft an offer. Because at the end of the day, I want my client to get the best offer. So if I can point them in the correct direction, knowing that they probably have the best chance of closing also, they usually end up with the best offer also. It always kind of scares me when I've got 2 or 3 agents that I've got a great relationship with, and then all of a sudden I get a last minute offer that was, or sent in late, that looks like it's the best on paper. And I haven't even talked to the agent, and now I'm presenting my client. I'm like, and then we got this offer 10 minutes ago. It's just like, it's not a good feeling. And so, and your clients can get that, they can feel that as well. Control what you say would be the next tips. Just stay calm, remain confident. It's just, you want to make sure that, you're showing your client in their best light, not really, you don't want to, assume that they're not going to get a property, and start to talk to them from a place of defeat. You want to be confident. And really you just really do want to stay calm. Agents have a tendency to snap very, very quickly. And it's actually interesting. I mean, I had an agent just a few weeks ago. She tried to cancel, or she tried to book 3 of my appointments on a property that was getting shown nonstop. She tried to book 3 of them right before the offer due date was up so that she could do a foundation inspection, for her buyer. She was going to have somebody inspect the house without my clients even approving it. And I kind of caught on to that. And when I, nicely told her no, she called me an unethical agent. So that's kind of a really, really good example of somebody that has absolutely no idea how to stay calm, because she was so wanting to get that deal done. It was a family member. She really, really wanted it. they were uncomfortable buying any house for some reason without a foundation inspection, even though it's not something we typically do on every house. And so when I said no to that, and she realized, shoot, they may not write a non-contingent offer now, and I might have a chance of losing this, even though I thought they were going to for sure get it, she snapped. And that immediately, at the time, basically took her out of the running, because I was like, this is going to be a nightmare transaction if we can't even get along when you're supposed to be really wanting to get along at this point. So just be calm. The other agent may explode, but if you can just kind of hear them and then move on, that's going to be the best thing. Refer to motivation would be another tip. So, there's times that you need to have tough conversations with the seller and explain the pros and the cons, fighting certain aspects of the negotiation. So bringing them back to their motivation is huge. If they're trying to get to some other state to be with family or whatever, bring them back to that and just say, we've been on the market for a little while now. This is the offer that's in hand. I think that it's at least something that you should consider countering, so that we can get you to Texas in the time frame that you want to get there. I'd hate to see you pass up on this and not even counter it, and then 2 months later we don't have another offer. And now you're making mortgage payments on 2 different properties. So you're bringing them back to the motivation. Why are they doing what they are doing? Because people start to see red and they get tunnel vision, and then I've seen people almost blow up deals over $5,000 and $1.5 million sales. It's just crazy. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, what I like to say is, how would you feel if tomorrow I told you this, someone else, won this offer, because, they were willing to go the extra $5,000, and they
Right.
generally say, well, I will feel bad. And I'll say, well, let's do the right thing,
Right. No, I love that. Absolutely. That's a question I like to ask my buyer as well is, what price would you no longer kick yourself for if you lose this property and I have to tell you what it sold for tomorrow? If I tell, if they're at $1 million, if I call you tomorrow and I say, somebody got it at $1,025,000, are you going to be upset about that? Because if you're going to be upset about that, then the house is probably worth it to you. And I think that maybe we hit that number and you have a good chance of getting it. And so again, that's a great, I love that point. I use that similarly all the time. And then don't reveal too much. This is one of the big ones. So, again, a lot of agents, they don't do this a lot. And so if you are continually asking them good questions and then just waiting for them to keep talking, a lot of times they're nervous to negotiate. And so, you ask them a question and they'll just keep talking. And then when you don't immediately jump back in like they expect, they start clarifying and talking again. And that's when you start to get the real answers that you're looking for. And so just don't reveal too much, and selectively reveal and kind of understand who you can reveal things to and who you can't. So for instance, if I have somebody that, I know they're going to be a really strong offer and they're saying, well, if I write at $1,050,000, is that going to get the deal done? And I'll just let them know, I can't tell you, I'm not going to share specifically what the offers are right now. I can tell you they're really close. And we have gone well over $1 million at this point. We're definitely, so I'll be a little bit vague about it. And then have them, up themselves essentially. Or, I might have somebody where they're an all cash offer. They're like $50,000 off. They're non-contingent. Everything looks perfect. They are closing in 14 days. But again, they're like $50,000 off. At that point, I may just counter them back at an exact number. And so it's just understanding, when to reveal information and when not to reveal information, and don't reveal too much. Don't be too attached to the outcome. This one's big. If your clients start to feel like you want it more than they do, then you may not be working with them on the next offer if they're a buyer, or they may start to feel uncomfortable with you as a listing agent. And so you need to disconnect the idea of the commission. I know it's very, very difficult to not be adding commissions in your head all the time. Like, okay, this is going to be good. You just want to make sure that you're always looking out for your client. If it's not right for them, it's not right for them. And if you push them, not only will they may not want to work with you anymore, but you're not going to get any referrals from them down the road either. And so, I've actually told my clients not to write an offer on a property before, just because I knew that they were getting a little frustrated. They hadn't seen anything in a few weeks. Something popped up and I could tell that they they didn't love it. They walked through, and it wasn't that they didn't love it and they could see themselves living there. It was like, they were just like, I'm done. Let's just get into something. We'll figure it out later. And I remember just kind of getting to the points where like, they really don't like this house. And I told them, let's wait, let's not write on this one. There's going to be something else that pops up. And literally 3 days later, the perfect house popped up and we were in contract over the weekend. So, if in that client has already been referring me multiple clients at this point, because I was the one agent. They couldn't imagine an agent really telling them not to buy a house. So if you want it more than they do, they're going to pick up on that very quickly. Okay, so it's going to talk about the 3 Ps of the negotiation. Let's jump into that. So first is to learn. Know your goal, have a clear goal of reaching a win-win. We kind of talked about that. That's so important. And that's important throughout every step of the process. So, I want them to, when we get into contract, I would like both sides to feel happy, because that's going to make the next step a lot easier, right? So you get to the next step and now you're in negotiations if they have an investigation contingency or whatever. And so if they were already really happy with the client and all that, and then you get to this step, they're going to be more likely to work with you on either side. Okay. So then you get to the next step, and you might get past all of that stuff. And then there's an appraisal issue, so you want to constantly have everybody, on good terms as much as you can, and make sure that you're giving and taking, as you can, so that you can go through these steps and not hit one where it's like, okay, well, we really, really won on that one, and then something worse happens and you have no legs to stand on because you just went crazy fighting over something that you may not have needed to. And so, every step, even through the end, making sure that you keep those relationships intact and keep everybody happy as possible. You're going to be less likely to have a buyer in a property to where every time something goes wrong, they're like, that seller screwed me. Now you're getting calls all the time. And so, every step of the process, having a win-win is incredibly important. And then make sure that you fully understand your client's goals. So know your client, learn the areas that they're willing to negotiate and where they're going to have to stand firm. So based on, their comfortability factor, what their risk tolerance and all of that, and based on what they can actually afford to do. So if they don't have the extra money to cover an issue with the appraisal, then that's not something that they're going to really be able to budge on. And so find out, okay, well, what can you budge on? And talk to them about that ahead of time and prepare them with a few different scenarios, so that you can negotiate on their behalf. Because I'm not going to, if I'm talking to the other agent and I'm trying to figure out what's the most important to their seller as far as terms and all of that stuff, I'm going to always be looking for, okay, where is my client able to budge? And where is that going to help in the seller situation? Where do these things add up? And then I'm going to focus our negotiation on those things. So then again, I can say, the appraisal, I know that that's a tough one, and and I will even reassure them, looking at the comps, I have absolutely no concerns. Appraisals have not, we've been having great luck with appraisals. Everything's just been moving up. Appraisals have been easy. I really have no concerns, but at the end of the day, I have to make sure that I protect them. They're first-time home buyers, blah, blah, blah. And so that's not something that they're able to budge on, but let's look at this, because I know that this is important to the seller. We can work with you. And so like wherever you're basically let them know, okay, I hear you. I understand that that's a concern. But here's what we can do. And so if you know your client really well, you're going to be able to do that on their behalf. And then think ahead. So I already kind of mentioned this, but prepare your client for possible outcomes so that they're not surprised. And so, if they understand what all of the different possible outcomes can be, then instead of you just presenting them with a document and having them all of a sudden mad about it because they just saw it, they might, a lot of times people will see something when they're not expecting it and just want to reject it outright. If I'm able to let them know, hey, so just so you know, as a buyer's agent or whatever, when I'm talking to my side, I will refer to myself as somebody that works for the other side as well, for other buyers or sellers or whoever, and just let them know if I was going back to them, this is probably what I would encourage them to do. And so just be prepared that that's something that they might say. And so they might be mad about it in the moment, but once they have time to sleep on it, think about it, then they get it and it's not out of the blue. And they may have already decided to make a better decision. And so just preparing them for those things and making sure that you are setting expectations where you're, under promising and over delivering. Under promise and over deliver is one of my like staples in this business. It's always the way to go, always. So yeah, let's move on from that. So open-ended questions, again, super important. Keeping the other side talking. Like I said, the more they're talking, the more information you're going to get. The less you talk, the more likely you are to say something you shouldn't. So it's saying, what additional information should I know? What's important about closing in 30 days? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? Things like that. That's just going deeper and trying to figure out what the root of, these things are. Is there a way around it? I'll ask, what are the sellers? So here's some questions I ask. I'll ask, what's the seller's expectations? Where do they think this thing is going? Because in this market, a lot of people are pricing for $1 million, but they know that they're getting way more. So do they have any idea of what offer they're looking for? And some agents will straight up tell you, like, we're expecting it to go for 1.15. I'm like, okay, great. Now I know. So some of them will just kind of let you know. But it does give you some kind of a good idea. And obviously you're going to want to continue speaking with them, but I will refer back to that conversation later, the day before the offer due date, and just say, hey, when we were talking before, I know the seller was kind of thinking it was probably going to be in the 115 range. Does that look like it's probably going to be the case? Do you have any offers in that range yet? And so I'm constantly trying to kind of pick at that and figure out if I can find out, where do we need to be in the ballpark to at least get a counter. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was going to say, I had a situation like that in February where we were putting in an offer on a mobile, and I just asked the agent, I was like, hey, how many offers do you have? What's your client looking for? And he said, well, actually, we have a lowball offer. And I was like, what's a lowball offer? And he told me the price. And I said, so what are you guys looking for? And he told me the amount they were looking for. And I made the offer at that amount, and we won.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So, and agents do that all the time. I've had that before where, that's probably them speaking too much because, they had an offer. So what they had was a multiple offer situation. And I would be going with the multiple offer situation over that, so, and somebody probably will ask, was it full ask or something like that? And, I'll be honest, and I'll let them know, it wasn't quite full ask, but it was a solid offer. So, let me know what your client can do. My seller's going to, keep considering this other one. That's more how I would respond because, if I give them a number, that's the number I'm going to get. I told somebody, this is actually a good example. I had one, we had listed it at 900,000. We had our first offer come in at 1,010,000. And so somebody was asking me like how many offers we had. I said, well, we've already got, we've got one, we've got probably more coming. I will tell you that we already have one that's gone, over $100,000 over the asking price. We're well into it now. So instead of telling them 110, I said that we were now, a decent amount over $1 million, which, 10% over is a decent amount over $1 million. They came back at 1.1. So if I told them 1,010,000, or whatever, they probably would have come back at like 1,015,000, 1,020,000. That's what I would tell my client to do, make it a little bit better. Instead, I didn't tell them and they came back $90,000 over. So, just kind of selectively release information, but you always want to be honest. But that doesn't mean you always have to let everything out of the bag all the time. And then, so I'll ask, how many disclosure packages have been downloaded? I want to know that too. Because if I know that they've had like 30 downloads, good chance they're getting like 10 or 15 offers. So I do want to know that. I'll ask if they have any offers in hand. That's a good question to ask. Then I'll even ask, I'll ask if anyone's informed them that they're going to write if they don't have an offer. I'll ask if they were to get an offer, today before the offer due date, and it was really, really strong. Is that something they're considering, or are they definitely waiting for the offer due date? I want to know that because I don't want to be in a position where my client thinks they have until Wednesday and then they tell me that it went pending on Monday. That's never a good look. And so at that point, I'll just let them know, if anything changes, I know you're going to wait till Wednesday, but if something does come in and it's crazy, if you could just keep me in the loop, because, we could act very, very quickly if we needed to. Otherwise, I'll plan on, touching base with you Tuesday or Wednesday morning. So I'll go over that just to make sure that we're all on the same page there. And that's a lot. That's most of what I ask. When I get into the day of, I will start asking more specific questions, So, the day of, if the offers are due at 5 p.m., 10, 11 o'clock, noon, I'll give them a call back and just say, hey, how many, how's it going? How many offers do you have so far? Have we hit this number yet? So might be when I'm coming back and saying, hey, we talked before. I know the seller was thinking was probably going to go in the, around 1.15. Do you have offers at that point yet? And typically they'll say, if they don't have a good answer for that, then they don't. If they say yes, then they probably have something right around that. Or they might say, oh, actually, we've actually exceeded that. And so, and then I'll ask until I get shut down, so, okay, gosh, okay. Are we at like 1,175,000? And so I'll kind of play with it and see if I can get them to, give me some more information, but that's what I'm doing there. And that's most of the questions I ask, outside of what's important to the seller, going over what they really want to keep, things like that. Do they need a lease after sale, anything like that? Would a really fast close of escrow help if I know my buyer can do that? So yeah. Okay. So what would happen if it helps the buyer to truly consider different situations and how they would react? Already talked about that a little bit. And it's just, it's not never trying to scare them, but always just letting them know, hey, this is, and I always put myself in the position of the other agent so that they know the other agent's not a bad guy. If they like me, then I can just let them know, hey, if I was working for the other side, this is what I would be encouraging them to do. And so don't be surprised if you see that and kind of consider where you think you would, what kind of decision do you think you would make in that case? And let them start to think about it a little bit. And then I actually wrote down what you had mentioned earlier. I'll let them know what's the max price that you'd be willing to pay. Because this is very competitive, where that if I told you it went over that tomorrow, you'd be okay with it. You'd say, you know what, I did the best I could, and let them know, I'm not just going to obviously ask you to write at that price, but I think it's good, it's good to know, so that if they're asking me if there's room, I at least know I can come back to you and we can talk a little bit more about it. So it's just it's just a lot of preparing them at that point. And then more, okay, so ask questions to clarify and set clear expectations. There's a few scenarios. I'm not going to go over those today because it's going to just take way too much time to try and break up into groups and all that, but take a look at those and write some notes. How would you respond in some of those situations? There's one in there that the buyer is going to be writing an offer that's under the asking price because they have student loans and they're trying to figure out how to keep their payment at a certain level. There's a way to handle everything. If I have a buyer that says, well, I can't go up that high because that's going to put it like $300 a month over where I want to be, or where I'm going to feel comfortable. I might let them know, hey, what would be a good idea is maybe talk to a CPA. And go over what your tax benefits may be, and take a look at that, because sometimes you're going to get more of a tax break than you might think, and that might actually effectively make it feel like your payment is less than it actually is if you're going to be able to retain more of your taxes. So maybe talk, and so like little things like that to try and figure out how to get them to understand what they are and are not capable of. But take a look at those scenarios and kind of make some notes on those. Those are actually some really good ones in there. Alrighty, let's see here. Okay, so pay attention to verbal and non-verbal cues. This, I like to present offers in person when I can. This is a dying art. Almost no one does it anymore. And honestly, during COVID, really, we just haven't been able to. But if I can present an offer in person, especially if it's an agent that's been in the business for a long time, they really are going to react well to that. Sometimes they might just tell you, okay, absolutely not, I don't have time, blah, 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 and don't push them to do it. But a lot of times they will actually be pleasantly surprised that you're willing to do that. Now, when I can present in person or at least over Zoom, I can sense when I'm telling them what the offer price is, whether or not it's good or bad. You can look at their eyes and say, okay, how are they reacting when I say the price? And again, you want to say all of these things confidently. You want to say all the terms confidently and not assume that's something. The second that you assume that one of your terms isn't going to work, and you don't present that confidently, if it was going to work, now it can't, because you've already told the other agent that that's not something that your buyer's expecting to actually get. And so be confident, especially when you're presenting in person, but watch the other side and see how they react to it. and then ask those same questions. Are we even in the ballpark? Like where are things at this point? Do you think that we would get at least a counter? So you can, if you know that it's not looking great, then you can start to ask these other questions to figure out, is there some way that I can go back and tweak something? What's the sticking point? All of that really helps when you're doing it in person, but at the very least, do it over the phone. Because you're going to get more information over the phone. If you send an offer to me for one of my listings and you don't ever call me, you're just not going to get the same kind of information that you would get if you were to pick up the phone and ask. And so the agents that call and ask, sometimes they will go back to their clients, and before we're even sending out counters, they're already countering themselves. And so make sure that you present at least over the phone. I like to have my whole email offer, everything formulated and set up so that once I hang up, I can just send it over to them. And so presenting in person or over the phone is important. Keep quiet once you present. So once you present it, you give them the whole rundown, the summary of the offer, and then just wait and see what they say. Some agents, it's funny, like I'll stay quiet on my side when a buyer's agent presents an offer, and I'll just kind of pause and sit there. And then all of a sudden they start to clarify. But honestly, like if this is an issue, I could probably work on it. And so all of a sudden they get silenced. They don't hear anything back, and they're already starting to clarify things in their offer that they're willing to tweak. And so don't be that person. Just present it and kind of stay quiet and wait for the other side to respond. And then listen carefully to what is important to the other party. So you just be sure that they understand that your clients are considering those needs and want to be as supportive of those needs as possible. And so, again, it's just making sure that you sometimes paraphrase back and just say, hey, I hear what you're saying. I know they're looking for this and this. Here's what I think that we can do. We can work on this side, assuming you already know your client, and then reiterate. I hear this is important also. There's that one I can't really do too much with because of this, and this. And if you let them know, they would love to do that, but this is the reason that they can't. So you're bringing kind of personality to the offer, and so there's always if you don't do that, a lot of times what happens is the other side just feels like they're at battle, when in reality, there might be a really good reason that your buyer or your seller can't budge on that, that if explained to the other side, that side may not feel quite so attacked at that point. And then stay calm. We already talked about this, and relax. It never pays to be the party that loses their cool. So again, if they think it's going to be a bumpy ride based on how they're talking to you, before you get the offer accepted, they're really not going to want to work with you once it gets accepted. And then focus on the customer's needs. So, again, just kind of considering what the other side needs, and then just trying to match those to what your buyer can do or what your seller can do. And then we already talked about giving your offer the best chance. So just present with confidence. We've already talked about that. Never assume that your offer is too low or your terms are not good enough. You never know. And markets can change on a dime. Like, honestly, I've had it to where homes were selling for $200,000 over the asking price to literally the next week, those homes were no longer getting offers. So things change quickly. And so you want to make sure that you're not just assuming that your buyer's not going to get the property. And then learn. So ask what and how questions instead of, it keeps them talking. So what's important about closing in 30 days? And again, my goal is to let the buyer know why this is important to you. And so again, it's letting them know, hey, it's nothing personal. This is actually the reasoning behind it. And that really helps the other side to understand. And then acknowledge and confirm the common ground. So, if you can isolate the major concerns that the other side that has, and you can fit within a fit within a flexible area for your buyer, then you can have a real discussion with the other agent about the solutions you have already talked about with your buyer and already cleared with them. But just don't give them everything at once. And so if the other side, that they are worried about the appraisal contingency and also want you to be $25,000 higher, I'm going to start with whichever one my buyer would like me to. So if the buyer is saying, we'd rather pay more than have to worry about the appraisal because we'd rather add to the loan than have to come out of pocket, we can't do that. Then I might let them know, hey, if I can get my buyer up to that price. If I already know that my buyer's willing to go there, I don't know if I can do anything about the appraisal contingency, but if I can get my buyer up to that price, is that something that you think is workable? Now, if I know that my buyer is willing to do both of those things, I'll still start with one of those. But I won't give them both, because the thing is the other side, they want to get the deal done too. They want to get paid. And so a lot of times, if you give them kind of piece by piece things that your buyer's willing to budge on, wait for them to stop you. Because at some point they're going to say, okay, you just said what I know is going to get the deal done. And if you can get that done just by waiving the appraisal contingency and saving your client $25,000, or they can pay $25,000 and keep their appraisal contingency, or retain $25,000 while keeping their appraisal contingency. You don't want to give them both of those things at the same time. So kind of one by one. And then ask what and why questions to find out why things are important to the other side, so that you can explain this to your client, which we've already talked about. And then know when to walk away. And so, when you get to the point to where you've kind of let them know what your buyer can do, sometimes it's just fine to say, hey, I really appreciate your time. I wish we could come together on this. I don't think that it's going to work. But make sure that you're still keeping the relationship strong. This is not the time to get upset and be like, well, maybe next time. No, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for all the information you've been able to give me. It looks like this one's probably not going to work out. I was having that conversation literally 2 weeks ago when they caved. So actually, I think they waited like 3 minutes and texted me back that we had a deal. So, know when to walk away, but be really, really nice about it, I guess would be my, that's all I got to say about that one. This one, again, this is another scenario. I think we'll go ahead and skip that one because we don't have a lot of time. Counter tactics. Yeah, go ahead and read these in the book. They're good. As far as the good guy versus bad guy stuff, I do like what they say here. Call them on their game. If it continues, then attribute what the bad guy says to the good guy. Since they're a tag team anyway, this will likely diffuse the tactic because now you have two bad guys. And so that happens a lot. I'll have, one seller that they might be ready to take an offer at $1 million. And the other seller is like, well, I'm not going to take the offers unless it's $1.25 million or whatever. I'll basically hear the bad guy. And I'll say, hey, I hear you. I totally understand where you're coming from. And I know that you want to get the most out of this property as you possibly can. And here's where I'm coming from. And then I'll be saying that to the guy that, the bad guy or bag or whoever, and then I'll look to their other counterpart, and I'll explain where I'm coming from. And so I'm kind of going between the two because the other one might be willing to work with me anyway. But when I'm making it sound like she or he is in the same boat as the other side, then that person is going to want to fix that problem. And so, they might even start reassuring me right then and there, but at least they can go back and have a conversation about it. But the big thing is just to make sure that you paraphrase them and make sure that they understand that you're hearing what they're saying, and that's going to help for sure. When it talks about ask for concession in return before agreeing to any further concessions, that's, I think, talking about the hot potato thing where they're basically saying, well, we're going to basically pass this on to you. If you're going to talk to your buyer about something, let them know, hey, if I talk to my buyer about this, they're not going to be able to do anything else, and kind of let them know, and you're ending that conversation right there. Because you will have people that will keep kind of coming back at you and for little things if you give a mouse a cookie, type of a situation. That's mainly the the information from in here. A lot of this other stuff is just scenarios and going over your contacts added and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to kind of open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions before we wrap up today. Any questions at all?
I don't have any questions, but this was really helpful, Brian. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Sorry, I have to leave now. I was committing myself to something else, 10 o'clock.
Oh, no worries. Well, I appreciate you all being here. If anybody has any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me anytime. It's just my first name, last name @kw.com. So I'd love to help with anything that I can.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks.
No
Covered
problem.
everything perfectly. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.